Number 9, Florida State preseason preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 59 of Good Morning College Football. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and CampusToCanton.com. We are just 64 days until the 2024 college football season kicks off with Florida State and Georgia Tech meeting in Dublin. And today we're going to be talking about, of course, one of those teams, the Florida State Seminoles, who may be, starting a revenge tour there in Dublin following the playoff snub for the Seminoles last season. The roster is rebuilt. Head coach Mike Norvell and his coaching staff have done an excellent job over the last few years of tapping into the transfer portal to complement the high school talent on hand. And Florida State, obviously, is number 9 in our preseason rankings, is currently the top ranked team in our ACC power rankings at CFB Winning Edge. But before we dig into all of the details with Florida State, do want to, of course, thank those of you who are joining us live. If you are doing so on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, or even if you're not, we very much would appreciate you subscribing there. Liking this video, it really does help us continue to grow. Not only these previews, which a little bit maybe different than some, certainly longer, a lot of numbers. We talk about a lot of the things that we use at CFB Winning Edge, like a returning production database, our team profiles, our projections, and maybe I'll admit it's not the flashiest of previews, but hopefully we give you a lot of information and a pretty in-depth look at certainly how our projections come together and how they view each team. So if you're interested in checking out all 134 teams in our team profiles or returning production database, our full stat projections, which have individual team pages as well, those are coming out in July. But if you'd like immediate access to every team, don't want to just wait for each of these previews 3 times a week, consider becoming an all 22 or C2C Winning Edge tier member at CampusToCanton.com. All 22 gets you access to everything that Campus to Canton has to offer through the site. Includes all the written content, all the tools, everything to get you ready for your college fantasy football leagues this year. Dynasty leagues, Devy, the C2C format of the game, which is, of course, a full college side and NFL side to your fantasy football teams. Plus, just all the great written work and, like I said, tools, analysis, rankings, all that great stuff. But if you want to try it out, you can do so for as little as $2.99 per month to get access to CampusToCanton.com. That does include access to the Discord, where you can meet like-minded folks who are interested in learning as much as possible, discussing college fantasy football, C2C, all of that. And then those tiers build up from there. And we have different channels available the farther you go up in those tiers. And then, of course, if you want access to everything that we discuss here and the documents that I show in these team previews, consider that all 22 or C2C Winning Edge tier membership, please. So thanks to those of you who do. And with that out of the way, let's do people still say talking about the Noles? I don't know. Let's do it though, I suppose. So Florida State is number 9 in our preseason power rankings. And if you were with us in the early days of Good Morning College Football a couple of months ago, right when it was starting to round out the top 25, 30 or so teams in our team profile updates. So updating all the roster information, all the talent recruiting information, seeing how things worked out once we took out players who were leaving for the NFL draft early or transferring out or out of eligibility, also entering, adding those incoming transfers, started to see sort of how things were changing as we transitioned from the end of the 2023 season to 2024. Had a long discussion when we got to the end of our ACC power rankings about that SMU at that point was actually the highest ranked team in the ACC. I mentioned during my sort of therapy session where I was going through trying to figure out what to do about that, because even though our numbers, really love SMU, and we'll talk about the Mustangs before too long, I did come to a decision that, okay, we are going to have to give a little bit of a penalty for SMU making the transition from the group of five into the ACC. We can get into that in more detail later on. But as a result of that, Florida State took its top spot in these ACC power rankings, and probably deservedly so. I mean, Florida State is the preseason betting favorite in the ACC, according to DraftKings. The number as of this morning was plus 280 for the Noles to win the ACC. DraftKings also has Florida State 8th in its national championship odds. 22-1 was the most recent number that I saw there. They were plus 130 to make it to the college football playoff. So almost, considered basically a 50-50 shot of making the playoff or not. And then the win total posted there by DraftKings. It's just a matter of habit, by the way. I always usually, I guess, refer to DraftKings, not a sponsor or anything, but they're just sort of the go-to for me, I guess, and have been using those numbers for a while. So to stay consistent, the win total posted there is 9.5 for Florida State this season. So the other projection systems out there that we reference, how do others see Florida State entering this season? We are not the highest. FSU at number 9 is a little bit behind two sources that we've referred to often so far throughout these previews. We'll continue to do so. But FSU is number 7 in the preseason top 25 post-spring portal top 25 that Andy Staples did at On3. Also number 7 in the Sporting News preseason rankings. Both of those are, if I understand correctly, geared a little bit more toward, a predicted order of finish. So how well will this team, in the season, finish the season in the national rankings, not necessarily a power rating system, who would be favored against who in a neutral field. That is what we do. And we do seem to be on the high side as far as sort of the computer, no opinion based rankings, with Florida State as a top 10 team in our team strength rankings. But Stuart Mandel of The Athletic had FSU number 10 in his similar post-spring top 25. Mark Schleybaugh at ESPN had the Noles number 11. And then the first, primarily computer-based analytical system, the Football Power Index at ESPN has Florida State number 11 as well. At number 12, SP Plus at ESPN has the Noles, fringe top 10, but certainly respects the way this roster has been rebuilt and past success and all of that factoring in. Athlon also has Florida State number 12. Phil Steele's magazine, he's got a top 40 or so rankings, has Florida State 13th. Also has a power poll that has FSU 14th. Kelly Ford of the K Ford ratings is of a similar projection, has FSU 14th. And then the lowest system that we check, BetaRank has FSU 17th, so on the low side there for that computer projections system. So a pretty wide range. Some folks see Florida State knocking on the door of a top 5 team entering the season. Others have them outside of the top 15 looking in. But there was a piece, I believe it was published just this morning by Bruce Feldman at The Athletic, where he started out with, hey, anybody can do a top 25. That's easy. And he did make the reference, if he were to do that top 25, he'd probably have 5 SEC teams in his top 10 or 12. I forget the exact number he said. But he said, with the change in format of the college football playoff, it's a little trickier to predict that. And as sort of disastrous as the playoff scenario was for Florida State last season, and I'm on record, if you're listening to the CFB Winning Edge podcast that we do once a week, which, by the way, we have now previewed every Group of 5 conference, and we're going to be previewing the ACC starting next week. We'll be doing part 1 and part 2 for each Power 4 conference moving forward. But last year, right after Florida State was snubbed after running through the regular season undefeated, winning the ACC, in my view, they had earned that spot. And so it was very disappointing, very unfortunate. That all said, that system no longer in play. Florida State potentially could be a beneficiary of this new format, especially if they win the ACC, get that automatic bid, which Bruce Feldman expects the Noles to do, and actually had Florida State slotted as the number 3 seed in his playoff projection. So you could say that Bruce Feldman is potentially higher on Florida State than just about anybody else, although a lot of those rankings that we referenced do have FSU as the team to beat in the ACC. So it would probably work out that way, that FSU is 3rd or 4th in those playoff what's the word, bids. I don't know. I'm still getting very used to all the new playoff scenarios, but regardless, with 10 players moving on to the NFL, drafted in the NFL, even more than that, I'm sure, in training camps this fall, it was going to be quite a bit of there was certainly a long to-do list as far as players and overall production to replace for Norvell and his coaching staff. But as Feldman lays out, there's still a good core of returning players. We'll dig into the exact numbers here before long. But this Florida State team is definitely, I think, well positioned to sort of right the wrong of last season. And though this team might not look quite as good on paper, the change in format could end up paying off and getting the Noles, with an opportunity to compete for a national championship that they were, in my opinion, wrongly held back from at the end of last year. Final few things, of course, the main question, and this was Bruce Feldman's main question in that piece for FSU. It's probably everyone's. What's the quarterback position going to be this year? That was the big storyline. Jordan Travis going down at the end of last season. That was pointed to as the reason why Florida State had to be left out of the playoff by the committee. So Travis is now moving on. DJ Uiagalelei is in his 3rd stop in his college career, and likely final, I believe, will be in Tallahassee. And is he, capable of leading this FSU team to a playoff, to an ACC championship again? Feldman, we've referenced his NFL draft pieces where he's gotten some insight from anonymous coaches and scouts, and one Big Ten coordinator who evaluated DJU when he was in the transfer portal, I assume, quoted here in the piece, said, "I think he got better at Oregon State. It was getting out of that scheme at Clemson that helped him. The arm talent and the feet have always been there. The consistent accuracy is a little better than it was. We liked him. We just didn't love him. Continuing on, Coach said, he's a huge dude with a powerful arm, but his accuracy isn't great. The ball comes undone sometimes. He's just been very inconsistent, but there is some talent there. Of course, DJ U was a 5-star recruit when he signed with Clemson coming out of high school, got a little action in that 2020 season. Looked like he was going to be the next great Clemson quarterback, future star, first-round NFL draft pick after his true freshman season, but didn't quite work out. Took a bit of a step back there, ended up at Oregon State. I think we did see some improvement, a little more consistency, but overall, not quite consistent enough for some, certainly. At ESPN, Jordan Reed has come out with a piece on NFL draft stock for these draft eligible quarterbacks within the last week to 10 days. We've referenced several times. DJU, of course, was one who Reed took a look at. He writes that the 6'4", 252-pound Uiagalelei has the size necessary to hang in the pocket and make tough throws. Continuing on, reading from the piece, he says, and played well in a more traditional offense last season, throwing for 2,638 yards with 21 touchdowns and 7 picks. His completion percentage declined from 2022 from 62.1% to 57.1%, however, and he remained hesitant to release the ball before receivers broke open. Things scouts will want to see progress on this season. So quarterback position, it's basically a foregone conclusion. I'm not sure that it's official. I don't remember Norvell officially naming DJU the starter, but it seems that will certainly he will be expected to take that first snap of the week 0 game against Georgia Tech, assuming you make it through fall camp fully healthy. But it's also possible I missed something. Maybe if Norvell did refer to DJU as the starter. David Hale, also of ESPN, last piece here on the quarterbacks before we dig into that preview, has the Florida State quarterback room listed in his tier 5, where he did a tiered ranking system for all 134 FBS rooms. He slotted DJU in with some teams also relying on transfers, some of them similarly well traveled, put him alongside NC State, Notre Dame, and Syracuse there as teams that, on the high side still, quarterback shouldn't be a major weak spot, but a little bit of question perhaps with a new face, being in that quarterback room and expected to lead the team there. Coming out of spring practice, Mike Norvell had a press conference. We're going back over a full month now, but on May 15th, Corey Clark of warchant.com was on hand for some quotes from Norvell that we I believe read at the time, at least some of them, but just a little bit of a refresher before we really dig in here. Mike Norvell, quoted here in the piece by Clark, said it was a really positive spring. He's talking about DJU here. We tried to put him in some situations that were going to make him uncomfortable. We tried putting him in situations that were probably a little bit different, and I thought he handled them all really well. I think he's growing in his confidence. I think he's very comfortable. I think he's got some guys around him that are going to help fit his skill set and will allow us to have a chance to be a pretty explosive offense. From there, Norvell gets even more positive thinking and discussing the pieces of this offense that FSU coaches have put around DJU. He was very complimentary of the offensive line, says when you look up front, our offensive line has got a chance to be as good and as deep as we've had. I'm excited about seeing Robert Scott back here this fall. You've got Darius Washington, who I think has a chance to be an All-American at left tackle. And Scott was a former all-conference caliber player as well. So that offensive line really should be a strength. Norvell goes on to discuss Malik Benson, the transfer from Florida State, how he was seemingly, one of the top playmakers in just about every practice, every scrimmage this spring, and so he certainly is expected to be someone that DJU works with quite a bit. Could end up being that top most productive receiver, top target, and certainly a playmaker in this FSU offense. So with that all out of the way, we'll do a quick look at last season, which I'm sure most remember quite well. Florida State was really, for the most part, maybe not every single week, but as I pull up our CFP Winning Edge 2024 team profiles here, taking a look at the 2023 season. A little bit fortunate if you look at those post-game win expectancy numbers from collegefootballdata.com, where they take a look at the box score, and if you were to play that game over and had the same exact stats 100 times, 1,000 times, however many, you would expect Florida State to come out ahead just 27% of the time in that 31-24 overtime victory against Clemson. Nevertheless, the rest of the way, Florida State was looking good, certainly until injury struck. And that Florida game, again, under 50%, as low as 12. Florida State was able to escape there with a victory, but that defense really, really showed up in the ACC championship game against Louisville, completed the 13-0 run to the ACC title. But then we know what happened. We know that Florida State was left out of the playoff. We know about the opt-outs. We know about Georgia, just going through and dominating a much, much different FSU team in the bowl game 63-3. But taking a look at the numbers, statistically speaking, from last year, and keep in mind, I say this all the time, but when we're looking at these things up in the top of our team profiles, like scoring margin and net points per drive, net yards per pass attempt, success rate, all that good stuff, we're talking about games against FBS opponents only, and we are talking about the regular season only. So for the most part, this excludes the post Jordan Travis Florida State team from last year. So do keep that in mind. These numbers probably are a little bit higher than what you might see if we did incorporate the postseason into these numbers. But nevertheless, net scoring margin, top 10 nationally against FBS opponents only. Top 10 also in net yards per play. Top 7 nationally in net points per drive, according to Brian Frumeau, who does filter garbage time out of those numbers throughout the course of the season. Number 6 in defensive points per drive allowed. So really an excellent unit there last season as well. Top 15 in net yards per pass attempt. A little bit, not quite as on the elite side of things when we look at net success rate or EPA margin. We use the equivalent PPA at collegefootballdata.com, but both still inside the top 25. So regardless, this Florida State team played like a top 10 team last season. They were number 9 in our overall team performance rankings, just on the outside of the top 25 looking in as far as offensive team performance, 17th in passing offensive team performance, 66th in rushing offensive team performance. But the defense was certainly a strength of this Florida State team. Number 12 in overall defensive team performance, top 10 against the pass, 21st against the run. Just an excellent team during the regular season, and until injury, unfortunately, struck at seemingly the worst time for Florida State and ended up being used as a reason or an excuse, you might say, to leave this FSU team out of the playoffs. So who's coming back, who's not from last year? Of course, Jordan Travis has run out of eligibility. DJ coming in. It's almost a 1-to-1, passing yardage out, passing yardage in, touchdowns out, touchdowns in, yard per pass attempt. The only thing was DJ a few more picks than Jordan Travis. Also a slightly higher average depth of target, both double digits. So this Florida State offense, certainly did not shy away from taking deep shots or really pushing the ball down the field with Jordan Travis, but DJ even stronger arm, even more of a vertical passing threat. He averaged 11.7 at Florida or at Oregon State last season. Trey Benson, one of those double-digit draft picks for Florida State, 14 touchdowns last year, 900 yards. That running back room has been deep at FSU for years. Lawrence Toafili back is the most experienced player from last year's FSU squad, but Roydell Williams, the transfer from Alabama, coming in after sharing the workload there, but going for over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns for a playoff team. Jalen Lucas, always been a personal favorite of mine, transfer from Indiana. He's a well-rounded offensive weapon, can be a real asset on special teams as a return man, also a receiver out of the backfield, but he can do some damage running the football as well. Great speed. Another of those players like Malik Benson, it seemed like Jalen Lucas was mentioned in every practice report this spring. Somebody who just, you can tell Norvell is really, really excited to see how he is folded into this offense. Not sure if, the overall numbers are going to be eye-popping, but I do believe that Jalen Lucas is going to have a pretty clear role in this offense and should be an exciting player for this FSU team. The receiving core got hit hardest, and perhaps has been the more difficult spot for FSU to fill, answer every question, fill every potential hole. Keon Coleman certainly emerged as a weapon early last season, developed into a high-round NFL draft pick, has been sort of a darling of the post-draft, sort of social media moments, but he will be missed in his 11 touchdowns. Johnny Wilson was another personal favorite of mine, just thinking back to the way, there were a couple of games where he just took over. Last season, couldn't get 100% healthy, seemingly missed a few games, only 2 touchdowns, but still just a presence on the field. His size is just something that is going to be difficult to replace on its own, even though he was certainly inconsistent at times. Somebody that opposing defensive coordinators had to keep in mind, could not really shy away from him. Jaheim Bell, pretty unique skill set. He turned into an NFL player as well. All 3 of those players are gone, and that leaves Kyle Morlock, who split time with Bell at tight end last season, as the leader in receiving yards coming back. Toafili at running back is actually the leader in receptions coming back from this squad. So, Jalen Lucas coming in, he was actually even a little bit more productive than Malik Benson, who's expected to be the number 1 receiver. Benson, of course, had some injuries last season as well, got off to a little bit of a slow start after being a pretty buzzy player preseason at Alabama last year. So hopefully he will be able to capitalize this year. But if we're thinking, all right, what's maybe the spot on this offense that could, in theory, hold it back just a little bit, you could say that, at least as it stands right now on paper, Florida State had more going out than it's got coming in as far as receiving production goes. And that's going to be something to watch. The offensive line, as Norvell said, looks like it's in really, really good shape. Getting Robert Scott back after he appeared in half the games basically last season, made just 1 start, but back and fully healthy, should be key to this being an improved unit. The additions of Richie Leonard IV as a 12-game starter, Jacob Ritzie also a starter at the FCS level. So there's a lot of experience here. Darius Washington, as Norvell said, could be an All-American potentially, but getting Byers back and Smith back and adding depth there alongside Scott, this should be a real strength of that Florida State offense. Defensively, not quite as decimated is not the right word, but comparing it to the receiving loss production, the defense is kind of in a somewhat similar spot as a whole. Lose the top 2 tacklers from last season, and Tatum Bethune and Kalen Deloach. starters in the secondary: Renardo Green, Akeem Dent, Brandon Fiskey, somebody who just another home run out of the transfer portal for Norvell and his coaching staff. Just really under the radar player, both he and Jared Verse, right? Who was an FCS transfer. Norvell and this staff hit home runs with both. They are going to be playing on Sundays this season. And though difficult to replace, that certainly was an area that FSU really addressed through the portal. You see players like Sion Lohea coming in, Amarion Cooper in the secondary, Grady Kelly up front, Cam Riley adds some depth at the linebacker position, but a name that's a little lower on the list because he didn't play a ton last season at Georgia, but Marvin Jones Jr. expected to come in, be a key piece of that pass rush. And then another name that we'll talk about, who he only played in one game due to the eligibility issues after transferring in from Miami. But Darrell Jackson Jr. got to see what he could do a bit in that bowl game. And he'll be somebody counted on as a real presence in the interior of that defensive line. Break it all down, Florida State is on the very low end as far as returning production in the ACC, but on a national scale, 80th overall for a team that went undefeated in the regular season, loses 10 draft picks, its starting quarterback, its top 3 receivers. 80th overall isn't too bad. You look at the raw returning production, Florida State ranked 101st. Just in who is not returning from last season's roster, 105th on the offensive side of the ball. So there certainly were plenty of areas that needed attention. And, Florida State did a good job, jumped up 20, 25 spots in those categories by adding experienced players from a variety of sources and overall made some positive momentum rebuilding this roster. So what does it all mean for this year? I forgot to do my banner for the returning production. Sorry about that. But as far as depth chart projections, roster strength, and position strength ratings, going back to our team profiles, CFP Winning Edge team profiles, it looks good. Looks good on paper. Florida State is number 12 in overall roster strength, top 10 offensively, just 29th on the defensive side of the ball. But I think that, and I've heard from some people close to Florida State, follow the program very, very closely, that we're underrating Florida State defensively, that the staff is very high on the defense. And I think understandably so. It is certainly possible that the way that we put those roster strength ratings together, where we use the recruiting site projections coming out of high school, so those rankings for players coming out of high school adjust for experience and career production. It's certainly possible that we're on the low side of the way that we account for how well this roster and specifically that defensive unit looks on paper. Patrick Payton had an incredibly productive season last year. Joshua Farmer was an All-ACC second-teamer, I believe. Darrell Jackson Jr., we mentioned, the 330-pounder who, according to people who follow the program very closely, likely would have been a starter on that defense last season that performed so well. Getting Marvin Jones Jr. Back in Tallahassee is key, should pay off. He and Peyton, I think, certainly could be one of the top pass rush duos in the ACC. Getting DJ Lundy, he had briefly entered the transfer portal, actually, I think committed, right, to Colorado, if memory serves correctly. Getting him back for his final year of eligibility helped solidify that linebacker position. Fintrell Cypress was wasn't he an All-American at Virginia a couple of years ago? So getting him back is key. Shaheem Brown, the most experience from just a pure percentage of snaps played last season. Getting those two back will be key. Another transfer that has huge potential, but didn't put up a ton as far as numbers or overall, snaps last season. Earl Little II expected to start as well, according to most. And then there's plenty of depth. You see the blue highlights here on our projected 2 deep. Florida State, really looked at building out this defensive line and attack the transfer portal to add guys like Kelly and Tomiwa Georgiai. My apologies if I mispronounced that. Also for Sion Lohea. A lot of attention paid to rebuilding that group up front, and the expectation, it sounds like, is that it's going to pay off. That shouldn't see, despite losing players like Verse and like Fisk, we won't see just a huge drop off as far as play up front. And last season, as good as that unit was, there was a little bit of room for improvement. You can see here perhaps our defensive line performance rating last season for Florida State. They finished 27th in the national rankings, the way that we calculate that. Take in things like stuff rate and line yards against and all that sort of stuff, some pass rushing numbers as well, and try to put a grade on it to help, because it's difficult to really gauge how productive, how impactful players are on both the offensive and defensive line. So we do those additional layers with performance ratings to try to account for that. And Florida State was very, very good. Maybe not as elite as it could be or was expected to be, but certainly played like a top 25 defense last season. And the way it shakes out right there on the top 25 at number 25 in our D-line position strength ratings this season. How do those compare to the raw recruiting numbers? And this is perhaps, like I said, some see that our roster strength ratings are potentially underrating this FSU defense. And it seems like that certainly could be the case, just a little bit younger. So those experience weights, those production points aren't maybe quite there compared to some of the top 10, top 15, top 20 units, the way we calculate it. But if you look in the left-hand column here, the average 247 composite rating, which I use as a proxy for raw talent, where do these position groups rank? It's mostly top 25 or very close. 22nd in average 247 rating on the defensive line, 27th at linebacker, top 10 nationally among defensive backs. So a lot of talent on hand, and you could argue that this coaching staff has firmly established a track record of developing players, whether they only get 1 year or 2 with them. Getting more out of these players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, than those raw recruiting numbers might indicate. The offense is even more talented from a raw recruiting standpoint. And DJ U, as a former 5-star, is carrying some weight there, but top 5 in average rating in the 247 composite coming out of high school at quarterback, top 5 across the board, rivals and on 3 as well. The running back position, they're top 10 across the board. Wide receiver, the 247 rating is on the low side at number 12 nationally. Rivals has it in the number 8 spot. The tight end position looks good as well. Top 15 nationally and a top 20 offensive line, just in terms of raw talent, but rebuilding through the transfer portal and just hearing what Mike Norvell has to say. The expectations for that group are certainly top 10, and that is a real strength as far as our position strength numbers go. Number 8 in that in those roster strength, position strength ratings adjusted for experience production. You can see last year the O-line performed like a top 20 unit. So what is it? Once we get through all of that roster strength wise, things look good on paper. How is it going to play out on the field? Taking a look at that win total projection and week by week projected point spreads. We're high on Florida State, but not as high perhaps as the odds makers. Getting Georgia Tech early, week 0 in Ireland. We do have FSU certainly favored by double digits. It will be a tough test. That Georgia Tech offense I personally have high expectations for. Last season was great. A ton of experience returns on that side of the ball. With this, FSU defense being a little younger, maybe needing a little time to gel, it's going to be a tough test. Do certainly think that Florida State's going to be in a position to win that game. It's going to be interesting to see how they come back, the week after such long travel. They do get a couple of extra days. That Boston College game in Tallahassee is on a Monday night. So it certainly could be a more difficult schedule setup, but having a few extra days, getting the home game should work out well for Florida State. Should be favored by 2 touchdowns or more in that game, close to 3 touchdowns in our current projections. Then an extra week to prepare for who we have as the top rated group of 5. Trained myself, I guess, too well. I'm now saying Power 4. Group of 5, highest rated team, Memphis, in week 4. That's going to be a real interesting matchup. Memphis is certainly, doesn't have quite the depth, but is going to be a high octane offense. Very experienced 4-year starter at quarterback in Seth Hennigan. Some weapons at wide receiver. We went in depth on it on the CFB Winning Edge podcast that was published just this morning, Friday morning, about Memphis maybe having the top wide receiver duo in the American. So that's going to be a tough test. But again, Florida State pretty heavily favored there. Opens, or I guess not opens, ACC play. I'm used to saying that by about week 5, but another early ACC matchup with new conference rival Cal, SMU to follow, and Clemson. That's a tough stretch. Don't have to make the cross country trip to Berkeley, but a new opponent. For the third straight week, three weeks in a row there, Memphis, Cal, SMU. That trip to Dallas will home field advantage be really key for the Mustangs. Not sure, but it'll be that first trip in a month after coming back from Ireland for Florida State. And again, SMU is a team our numbers absolutely love, and we actually do have the Mustangs favored in there. Do I personally believe they should be or will be? No, not necessarily. I'm not expecting SMU to win that game, but FSU is going to be tested, I would say, with SMU. And then will it be a little bit of a look ahead spot with Clemson likely, maybe a top 10 team by that time? We shall see. Certainly considered one of, if not the top challenger to Florida State in the ACC this year, even though that game is in Tallahassee. A little bit of a tricky spot there after the trip to SMU. Get a week off to recuperate. Florida State should be double-digit favorites against Duke. And then a really, the toughest, 3 weeks back-to-back with Miami, North Carolina, and Notre Dame. Having 3 road trips in 4 weeks is going to be tough. The trip to Duke and Miami, say what you will about the home field environment for both of those, but still it's getting on a plane, getting on a bus, not sleeping in your own bed. Then North Carolina is a team that our numbers like more than most, and then that trip to Notre Dame is always difficult. But by that time, Florida State probably will know whether or not they're headed to the ACC championship game. Their conference schedule will be done quite early after getting started in week 0 there after the North Carolina game. So the trip to Notre Dame, a week off, FCS, Charleston Southern, and then, of course, the second half of that sort of state championship rivalry series with Florida there to round it out as usual in Tallahassee this year. So there are some tough matchups. And like I said, SMU as a very slight favorite, a coin flip according to our projections. By the time that game kicks off, perhaps things will have shifted a little bit. We'll see see if SMU really is as good as our numbers like to think they are, or if Florida State is perhaps a bit better, gets off to a better start. I would not at all be surprised if our numbers have Florida State favored by, a field goal or more by time that game kicks off, but we'll see. You never know. The matchup against Miami, we also have Florida State as a slight underdog there, and against Notre Dame as well. So throw all those together, where Florida State is a slight underdog in 3 matchups. Some others where, against North Carolina, again, I said we're a little higher on the Tar Heels than most. We have Florida State as only a 64% projected winning percentage in that game. So add all those projected win percentages up, the 61% against Clemson, 64% against North Carolina, 38% Notre Dame, 47% Miami, It doesn't total, maybe as high as we might expect. Our projected win total in our traditional way of doing it, we've done this for all FBS teams dating back to 2021. We do have a 60.4% winning percentage doing it this way. We were 55.6% last year. So certainly not perfect, but overall pretty good. I'm comfortable with those numbers. We're a little low on Florida State compared to that 9.5 win total projection at DraftKings. So we would officially be on the under. Do anticipate being on the under for Florida State this season, projecting about an 8-4 record. Me personally think 9-3 is certainly more likely. 10-2, even 11-1 certainly is possible. We have made a little bit of a different win total projection that we're going to be grading separately from that way we've done it the last few years, where we give a 10% bonus for each game, each matchup in which a team is favored, and a 10% penalty for each in which that team is an underdog. Florida State gets a +6, being favored in 9 and an underdog in 3. So you can add 0.6 of a win to that projection. It still comes in under 9. So we're still projecting about a 9-3 record. It would be 8.91 projected wins in the more updated version of those win total projections. So we think Florida State is a top 10 team. If they win the ACC, they're going to be in the playoff. That absolutely is the expectation, is a reasonable goal, but it is a fairly difficult schedule, and there are, a lot of moving pieces, especially in that receiving core on defense, and it's a tricky schedule at times, a little more difficult maybe than it might look to the naked eye, especially if SMU is anywhere near as good as our numbers seem to think. Having that game right up, leading into the Clemson matchup, even though that game is in Tallahassee, is of course key. That well-traveled 4 weeks between the Friday night kickoff at Duke and that November 9th game in South Bend. How is Florida State going to be able to weather traveling a lot of miles, starting with that week 0 trip to Ireland, catching their breath a little bit in the first half of the season, but 3 road trips in 4 weeks, that can wear on a team, especially when you're facing, 3 of your top 5 opponents during that stretch. It could be difficult, could end up be in a situation where maybe Florida State wins or could be in danger of losing a game it should win. So very interesting team to me. Of course, how will the quarterback situation play out? But at least what we know is Florida State won't get snubbed if it wins the ACC this season. So perhaps that's a step in the right direction. But thank you for joining us today. This is that'll be it for us this week. We'll be back on Monday to discuss the top 10 team, or the last top 10 team in our preseason team strength rankings, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and under the new direction there of Kalen DeBoer. Again, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Please give this video a like, and we very much would appreciate if you would consider becoming a member at campustocanton.com. You can join for as little as $2.99 per month, or if you want access to all the sheets that we had on display during this team preview, please consider becoming a C2C Winning Edge tier member or an all 22 tier member. And that'll get you access there. Once you sign up, we do update and send out invites once a day, but you should be able to get to the link through your subscription profile at campus2canton.com. You can also get your Discord access there and reach out through the Discord to me as well and get access prior to that. So if you do sign up, reach out, request access, and we try to grant those as quickly as possible. But that'll be it for us today. Thank you so much. Hope you had a great week. Have a wonderful weekend. We will be back on Monday for Good Morning College Football from campus2canton.com. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen. Take care.